from 6, 7 years old. You trust the coach, all that crap. Like, don't speak back, all that nonsense. Like, they were powerless. Like, the power dynamics and the people that you're supposed to be trusting that make you a coach, a teacher, like manage all these things that are supposed to uplift you that were holding you down is just, it's incomprehensible.
So I mentioned we have to talk about the NWSL a bit and the Yates report. I read some of it and then I went through. It's awful. Read, go to The Athletic and It's Meg Linehan and at Thrace. There's a lot of people doing incredible coverage on it. But look, if you do not know the story, I mean, last year we talked about it, obviously with the news about coaches being involved in just coercion, sexual coercion. It's just all gross stuff. But I think this particular report, highlighted a lot of systemic problems that I think we were not aware of. And there's a lot of who knew this, and we don't know everything, but and this is, I think, kind of just scratching the surface of it. But the interesting thing here is that at least what I want to talk about is the sort of the systemic problems. And so you grew up playing soccer, right? I did not. I got into it. I played FIFA, right? And it's a lot safer. I'll say that. So I didn't grow up around a culture of being coached and somebody like, I played sports in school and stuff like that, but I didn't grow up around in any serious, environment where coaches were yelling at me or angry with me or anything of the sort. But once it gets to a point, even at a young age, like organized soccer, there's some stakes, right? There's either, parents that want their kids to succeed, or if a coach says like, oh, I think your son or daughter has real potential, then it adds this level of weight to to the sport. Yeah. And this is what it felt like reading this report, where it felt like the players in NWSL were being treated like, it was just there's no other word besides abuse, right? Yeah. It's just like it's like trying to find the line between what's a good coach telling you something and criticizing you to get the best out of you, and then when does it cross the line to just straight up absolute abuse and disrespect and things like that. So that's kind of what was my biggest takeaway, where it's hard to say, and this happened probably in boys and girls soccer, men's and women's, but as someone who grew up playing, is this something that either that you've experienced about that criticism went a little too far?
Yeah, I mean, and just even first going specifically on the NWSL stuff, it just sucks. Like, it's so disheartening. It's so sad that there's, so many, that the culture just existed, that so many people thought this was okay. And they're like, the power dynamics and stuff. It's just so gross, and just, I don't know, it hurts to read. You have to push yourself to read through it. You can't become desensitized to it, all that stuff, of course. But yeah, going general, that's obviously black and white. Like all of that stuff, gross, disgusting. It is an interesting kind of theme that you pick up on, and what's the gray area of the criticism and the yelling, stuff like that. It's all right, how much is too much? What's coaching, what's pushing players to get better? I struggle with that in all walks of life. You even think of the internal stuff you do to yourself, need to get to the gym. Oh, I need to work harder. And then it's all right, when you know how to find the balance. And growing up, I had obviously a bunch of different coaches, college, high school, every different kinds on all walks of life. One of my favorite ones was the most abusive. Not his style was yelling, and he was, sometimes you think that he might cross the line, and the other times and he was a product of the 70s, of where that's all you did. My first college coach was a legend at my school, and it was his last year. He retired after our freshman year. I'm hearing even from guys that are on the team that were there 2-3 years earlier, it's if something happened, we'd just go run in the woods. That's what. Oh, that was preseason training, and then it'd be hey, pick up that log and go run with it. And it's these were things that were just normal in whatever 20, 30 years ago.
That's why you became a Navy SEAL, right?
All this, it's just and I don't have nobody has an like these gray areas. It's all so awful and so difficult. It's just
it's a look. I would say it's a thing probably in men's soccer that men are probably just used to it or used to not saying anything or not being certain, like, was this something that went too far or whatever? Like, you carrying a log to me seems pretty funny. I mean, that seems funny. I mean, maybe there was like some lesson behind it, but it's a look. I think we know that line when of like this is maybe it might have been a bit aggressive, but we understand like, all right, you carried a log. It's not the end of the world, but anything that goes to racism or sexism or something like that, or being homophobic or whatever. And but to hear that there were coaches in NWSL regularly doing this is unbelievable. Like, I mean, it's just
incomprehensible.
It's a thing. Like, I read there's a great book called The National Team by Caitlin Murray. I read it maybe like 2 years ago, and there were a lot of quotes from former U.S. Women's National Team players talking about the previous leagues before NWSL and how they dealt. I don't think there were specific in that book. There weren't specific issues about harassment or assault or anything like that, but there were about just the kind of the treatment of the players and the training facilities that they had to use, and like, we've all heard the gross stories and of some of the places that they had to train and play. And one of the things, and this is what I took from the Yates report, was that there were some players that didn't. There wasn't an environment to be able to say anything because there was a fear of either a repercussion against them, or that it would actually hurt the league and make the league look bad. So, and I've seen this from like Julie Foudy say this, where they didn't want to publicly criticize the league because they were worried that the league would fold entirely, and they would almost have to live with that guilt of destroying something that everyone tried to build. And so that's, I say that to say that, I have a lot of respect and admiration for NWSL players because this is in their minds, right? I mean, when you see those specifics about players, trying to say something, and there's like a weird like gaslighting environment where it was like a coach would. I saw this from Michelle Betos, the Gotham FC goalkeeper, where she said that a coach would preemptively say something negative about a player that he was targeting to do like whatever. Either the player would criticize the player, and then when the player would be like, "Hey, I think you crossed the line," so then the rest of the team was like, they would have a biased opinion of that player because the coach already said that this player is problematic or the player has an issue or whatever. And that kind of stuff, it's just from a logical like work environment, workplace stuff, it's horrifying that stuff, that there wasn't that oversight. And it just says a lot about, this sport really in the U.S. is like in its infancy. And then when it comes to women's soccer, it's still... we're still at the foundation of it and figuring out the basics, and a lot of that stuff is not it's people are doing the work to like kind of set up that get that stuff into place, but it's like you said, it's disheartening that it wasn't already there, but there's it's troubling, it's complicated, but again, just a massive amount of respect for the players that did come forward.
Yeah, and it's really awesome. It's really brave. Like it's just the power dynamics, and again, the people who are supposed to be leaders and that you're trusting with your career, with your well-being in a lot of these cases because of how like many lines are crossed. It's awful. I wish I had something deeper to say. I wish I had something more illuminating. But just the power dynamics, and I try to think about it myself. Like you're from 6-7 years old, you trust the coach, all that crap. Like, don't speak back, all that nonsense. Like, they were powerless. Like the power dynamics and the people that you're supposed to be trusting that make you a coach, a teacher, like manage all these things that are supposed to uplift you that were holding you down. It's just, it's incomprehensible to think about, and such a widespread
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because even the position that we're in, right? I have you been to like a United Soccer Coaches conference or everything like that? But I've gone to 3, nice. and it's a fascinating world. It's its own world, and I say this to say, like, I know there's plenty of people who play soccer, people who coach soccer that listen to this show. It's like, I would hope the obvious is like to not do these awful things, but more than that, I think maybe the culture of coaching, especially in soccer, is maybe we don't need more Bobby Knights. You know what I mean? Like, can we maybe get past that?
More Jim Curtins is what we need.
Jim Curtins, who's the Phil Jackson? Wasn't he super zen? Phil Jackson?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I'm a Knicks fan. His lasting memory was being an awful GM.
So maybe that's the maybe point to take as far as like if you are involved in coaching in soccer at any part of the world or whatever, because we know, it's like cheesy, but it's like this game can like change people's lives, and it brings so much joy to so many people. So when you hear stuff like this, and when you hear that it's like so commonplace and so systemic, and then even on top of that, when people try to point it out and report it to the proper channels, and that nothing gets done, that is when you start seeing like people are protecting the institution before the actual players. And that's when we cannot do that. There's no other word for it. Okay.